Hello everyone and welcome to The Forge. This is a new YouTube channel I'm starting just to share some different ideas about the things that I think humanity should be looking at, and I'm trying to correct some wrongs along the way. We are going to be talking in this episode about who we are and why we are here. Again, focus is on empowerment to humanity and uncovering truths about our nature and about just things that we are told in the mainstream. As you guys know, a forge is where a strong and endurable substance, usually a metal, is melted down to be reformed. Well, in the case of this channel, we are still keeping with that same topic of a forge being used to reshape or reframe something, only in this case it's not a metal, it's the human mind. We want to focus on reframing your mind and your understanding of things because of limitations that have been passed to us. You've been told all your lives, whether you realize it or not, how to be limited. You've been told what to think, which limits your knowledge. You've been told how to think, which limits your free will and your choice. You've been told who to believe, which limits your information sources to those who toe the line. In some cases, people who are part of an agenda. And you've also been told what to believe, which limits your perspective of the past and sets your direction for the future. And we're met with any kind of non-conformance to these accepted norms with ridicule. And it's been a very effective tool. Telling someone they have to think like everyone else does, or to ostracize them when they start not thinking like everyone else does, is a very effective tool for control, and it prevents you from thinking for yourself and stepping outside the bounds of what's normal. Keeps you predictable. Our primary goal is to empower you to increase your awareness. And again, that's the primary goal. The production quality, the audio quality, all that other kind of stuff. This isn't some professionally produced video and content, right? It's just sitting down here, compiling information that we think is important for people to know, covering some topics that we know are frequently discussed and sometimes completely avoided because they might be challenging or difficult. Again, the main purpose of us being here: share information, make it accessible. We'll worry about the kind of stuff like video quality and audio quality later on, and I realize that too can sometimes be a distraction, but it's just there's urgency that I'll get to later on about why we think it's important just to get the content out there, and then later on, if time permits, maybe we'll go back and redo some of these in a different format. But primary goal: increase the awareness of the masses. We want to empower you to stimulate your own growth and your own development, because humanity has become way too content to let somebody else handle our growth and our development. We make it somebody else's responsibility to think for us. We make it somebody else's responsibility to set the boundaries of what we think and how far our thoughts may go. There's no bigger threat. You might be in a place that allows freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom. But the biggest thing that you will find, if you actually think about it or probe, is the biggest freedom that's frowned upon is freedom of thought. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't want you challenging the story, the mainstream narrative, and coming to your own conclusion, or worse yet, chasing it down and realizing that you've been lied to about some things, and that the benefit or the effect of that lie is to keep you out of something. As you grow, the ecosystem of which you are a part grows with and by you. Your neighborhood, actually smaller scale, your family, your neighborhood, your community, your city, your state, country, so on and so forth. Racial groups, religious groups, any group you feel that you're a part of, if you as a member of one of those groups starts to grow, starts to gain more knowledge, more experience, and especially when that knowledge and that experience is helpful to you and builds you up, the communities and the groups that you are part of are also growing because your knowledge is increasing. And then it'll be your responsibility to make sure that you do the same thing, pass that information on, help others gain that experience, and become people who are capable of thinking for themselves. Some of the tools we'll be using throughout the course of this channel and the episodes and the videos that we make are going to be critical thinking, We're going to talk about causality. We're going to talk about purpose and evidence. All of these things are very important, especially when it comes to looking at a mainstream story. Sometimes it's just about asking the right questions, and you'll find that usually those questions that we have to ask in order to dig deeper and get to the truth are those questions that we're often told we're not supposed to ask. Either it's wrong to, either it's silly to question them because everybody else already accepts it, or things to that nature. What we want to do with this channel is empower you to challenge when the story doesn't line up. You don't have to just sit there and accept it as you've been told. You don't have to sit there and repeat and hold allegiance to concepts that you've been handed down that you don't agree with. But that takes some kind of empowerment, that takes some encouragement, for people to know that that's okay to do, and that they're not alone when they start to do that. So we want to give you that courage to endure the ridicule that we know is coming because we've been there. And it's going to take, again, some fortitude to be able to withstand that ridicule, and have people say, again, why are you questioning that? Why are you challenging this? Why are you asking these questions when everybody else doesn't have a problem with it? You have to be resolute when you perceive deception in the mainstream story. Don't just take it and let it go because somebody told you have to. You have the right to challenge it. You have the right to think for yourself, and to press and press and press until you get an answer that's satisfactory to you. If you never get to that answer, you don't have to believe what somebody is telling you to. You can think for yourself. In contrast to the methodology of quote-unquote the ruling class, for this channel, we want the information and the discussions to be as accessible by the largest possible number of people. We don't want to have our conversation be so high-minded, so anything that's going to limit access to the material. We want to put this information out there to be accessible to the masses, and to let it be as easily digestible as we can possibly make it. We're not going to hide it behind languages that people don't speak, or restrict it to books that some people don't have access to. The point of this is to make this information and this discussion public, and to share information with the masses. The moniker that I've taken on for this channel, Striker, is symbolic of the channel's intent. What that word striker means is for you to seek truth and to reclaim your knowledge, your existence, and your reality. You have to do the reclaiming. It must be done by you. The benefit of reclaiming these things is all yours. And you also have to know, again, nobody else can take these steps for you. What this comes down to is a matter of you gaining the right experience and the right understanding. And in order for you to have that come by experience, you have to be the one to go through it. We'll tell you certain things, share information, but it's always up for a challenge, for debate, and for discussion. You have to find the journey on your own. The thing is, we have to be encouraged to know it's okay to step outside the bounds of what we've been handed if we don't want to go that same path. There are no shortcuts. There's no way to short circuit the process and get to the end and jump to the punchline without having the right foundation being laid. And that's going to be what we labor to do throughout the course of this channel and the content that we put out there. I get a frequent question when talking about these topics just in everyday life. And why are these topics? Why is the awareness of people relative to these topics important? Why rock the boat? Why challenge the mainstream narrative? Why make people have to go through the ridicule of challenging or thinking differently than everybody else does? Well, the reason being, information that's being spread is being spread with distortion. It's not always clear, it's not always accurate, it's not always true. In some cases, information is just simply withheld altogether for the sake of control. People have been indoctrinated with the belief in human limitations and faults and so many other things down the line that is beneficial to the ruling class when the masses accept that indoctrination. That's what we want to work to undo. People are very, very quick to embrace dogmatic divisions that separate them from other people. But a lot of times the people that they're separating from, because of these beliefs, visions, politics, religion, whatever case you want to name, the people that they become separated from are often people they have a lot more in common with than the person that's feeding them the divisive narratives. When your pastor might tell you that, somebody close to you that doesn't have the same beliefs is an enemy, is an other than you. Or when somebody somebody on the television talking to you through a TV screen from all the way across the country, from a social class that you're not even close to, and that they wouldn't want to let you in if you were sitting there face to face with them. But yet and still that person gets on the screen, gets in front of the camera, and will proceed to tell you about how you should be thinking about, again, people that are your neighbors, people that you share a neighborhood with. And if you're in the same neighborhood, you probably share the same social class, the same amount of wealth, all these other things that you'll have a lot more in common. You live in the same city, but yet you'll decide how you want to treat your neighbor because of what somebody is telling you from thousands of miles away, just sitting on the other side of a camera. Those are the kind of things that it becomes dangerous to just follow, to just accept these divisions that are handed to us without thinking about them, without really questioning them, without finding out, is there some other kind of motivation underneath that? Is there some other kind of agenda behind that narrative? And a lot of times if it leads to division, the answer is yes. We just don't always stop to think about it. We want to make those things clear. The population is made to believe barbaric human behavior is both normal and acceptable. It's my position that it's neither. We're not supposed to have this mentality that barbaric behavior is just the norm, it's just the way that we are. When you're told that and you believe it, it sets you up down a certain path that is, again, beneficial to somebody, usually not you. These things can prevent us from achieving what we should have done decades, even centuries ago. And that's for us to reach a point of unification that we're beyond the narratives, we're beyond the division, and we're able to actually start to navigate some of these differences that we think we have from one another and figure out a better way. That's the point. It's not about your mindset is wrong, my mindset is wrong. It's simply the way we've been going is not working out for everybody. Sure, some people have great jobs, happy with their family, happy with a whole lot of other things. But when it comes to your relationship with other people, and again, I'm not just saying that you're not a friendly person, that you don't have an active social life, but if you can think of a group of people or a specific person that is different than you and that you don't think very highly of because of those differences, that's what we're talking about. A lot of times it's not necessary. A lot of times there is a way to bridge that gap and still find some kind of common ground with that person outside of whatever reason you've been told or taught or trained to think of that person as quote unquote other and not like you, therefore not able to be in your circle. Until humanity becomes significantly more mature and gets on the same page, we contribute, most of the time unknowingly, but we contribute to this narrative that we are not ready to self-govern. We contribute to the narrative that we're not intrinsically benevolent. We contribute to this thought that we're best when we're hoarded together with others that are just like us and separated from those who are different. The worst thing we contribute to is this narrative that we're not ready to have control over ourselves. This one becomes the worst when we actually start to believe that's true. That the governmental systems, the control we allow people to have over us from any wide range of offices, of positions, and that we have to have them there because we're petulant children. We're not able to think for ourselves or to be mature, non-violent enough to be able to self-govern. So these kind of things, when we hear somebody telling us these things and we accept it and we believe it, by believing it, by accepting it, we're kind of proving them right. We're kind of getting what we deserve. And it's hard to say. It's hard to maybe, it's a difficult thing to maybe hear it like that. But if somebody tells you you're not mature, not ready to self-govern, and you start going out there and doing dumb things, unless somebody is there to guide you, you kind of prove them right. That's what we have to work on, getting more empowered in. Learning how to be benevolent, how to be in the mindset of being capable of self-governance, doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, and ultimately understanding that we can have control over our lives, over our finances, over our circumstances. That, again, has not been a convenient way for us to think in the past. We want to change that. People that are unaware can be taken advantage of, and they can be used to the benefit of those who control them by a narrative, by a lie, by some kind of deception. But usually those who end up controlling aspects of your life don't really care about you. All they want to do is siphon your life resources. Now, normally when you think of resources, the main things we think of are money and time. We don't really realize, we don't stop to think long enough that really we have a wealth of resources beyond just money and time that are valuable should we decide to lend those resources to other people. Among those other things are just your own energy. And you don't have to think about it in some metaphysical kind of way. This is simply your mental energy. What do you spend your time thinking about? Do you spend your time building up narratives in your mind that further divisive narratives, that further help somebody else that you have categorized or considered to be a part of your group to continue to think of somebody else as other, as different, as apart from you and from your group? When you start devoting your mental energy to that, other people who are running those systems that you're aligning with are receiving the benefit of your mental energy. If you go out and you work for a company, you work for your job, but you go out and kind of in your spare time start to devote your physical energy. You put your time and effort, your blood, sweat, and tears into a goal, a narrative, or some kind of institution that belongs to somebody else. You're also giving your physical energy to that institution. And the same can be said of the spiritual. Wherever we choose to worship, to believe, and to start throwing our resources, our time, our money, our thought processes, our voice, and everything else behind that, we're giving those resources to somebody else. We just often don't think about that. But the people that are getting those resources from you know very well what they're asking for. And a lot of times, your health. We don't take enough responsibility sometimes for maintaining our own health. And obviously, it's not even very difficult to see that there's a group of people that benefits from you not being knowledgeable about the right way to eat, the right way to care for your body. There's literally so many institutions, $1 trillion industry that benefits from people not being healthy, not taking enough time and effort on their own to work towards getting better. And sure, they'll tell you, eat better, lose weight, exercise, this and that. But in actuality, if you were to do all those things all the time and be serious about it and take control of your health and really, really get yourself in tip-top physical shape and just beat as many of the illnesses that you have the ability to, they're going to lose money. And even though they have somebody that's meeting with you face-to-face telling you, watch your health and be mindful of your health, they wouldn't mind that you stay sick because they get a whole lot of money and a lot of resources from you to do that. So you have to protect your health as a resource for yourself as well. Your biases, anything that, what this ends up being is your prejudices. What are the things that you prefer? What are the things that you think of? And sometimes this is when it becomes obvious. When you think, has the decision or the bias that I hold been derived from my own experiences, or was I told to think like that from someone else? And if you've been told to think like that and you've agreed and accepted that way of thinking without having the experience to drive it, you really got to rethink it, because a lot of times it's not meant to benefit us. It's meant to benefit the person that's feeding us that narrative. And another resource that's a very, very valuable one that we, again, often don't think of as a resource is your voice. You accept a mentality, you accept an opinion, you accept a way of thinking. And if you're really convinced that that's the right thing for you, they know, because we're people. You're going to go out there and you're going to tell somebody else. You're going to try to convince somebody else that you think is either qualified for that group, like you, or close enough to you that they can be influenced. And they know if they get you speaking on the behalf of any institution, any group, your resource, the resource of your voice, of you speaking favorably about something, it's going to bring benefit to whoever you're bringing that person back to. So those are the kind of resources that we also have that we don't often think about, above and beyond just the typical time and money. It's important that we perceive the mechanisms that are being used to steal resources from or otherwise manipulate us. What's going to be in scope for this conversation is the financial system, science and education, the government, politics, religion, race and ethnicity, and a whole lot more that we'll get into over the course of this channel. Anything that people use to attack one another, to hate one another, to manipulate, to control, to disenfranchise or otherwise harm or marginalize another person, any of these things has the potential to be a topic of discussion on this channel. And we'll try to get to all of them. If there's a problem that really, again, causes any of these things, especially when it comes to us hating one another, being divided, or having someone's belief, thought process bring harm to another person, those are things we have to revisit and we have to get corrected. There is a broader scope vision here at play. And again, over the course of this channel and hopefully earlier on in our earlier content, we'll start to lay out some of those things and how do we think is the right way to get there, and invite you to the discussion, invite you to be a part of it, with the intent of, again, every one of us being empowered. Okay, but all of these things are going to have a potential to be discussed on this channel. Maybe there's things we have, it's going to be coming in the future we haven't put together yet, but those are the kind of things we want to be talking about here. The Forge exists because of a compassion for mankind's predicament. Well, what does that mean? The division of the masses serves the ruling class. There's no two ways about it. Again, the fact that obviously I'm in the United States and we have a few groups of people in our capital that will spit these, these narratives, these political agendas out, and we accept them and we make them our talking points. Some of them may be important to you. Some of them maybe do harken back to some other group you belong to or some other mentality that you hold. But again, experientially, how many of those things have really affected your everyday life? How many of those things did you decide was the right topic to be discussed? How many times did you let somebody on the television tell you that the person right next door to you is an enemy because of this reason or that? Anytime those things are accepted, when they're communicated to us and when we accept them and put them into practice, again, we're serving the ruling class. We're serving a division that keeps people, and in our case, the country, divided enough that we stop being able to recognize. We're lacking enough focus to realize that there's something else going on behind the scenes that's, there's a benefit being had by somebody that's not us. So we have to figure out why these things are being done and figure out a way around them. The more unified we are, the more difficult we are to control. That's what it comes down to. When we are accepting these divisions and enforcing these divisions and reinforcing them time and time again, the fact that we're so disjointed means that people are looking for a leader of different factions. And in looking for a leader of different factions, they're going to be more than willing to step up and become that leader for you. Can you imagine if everybody not thought the same? We don't want to just make a country full or a planet full of a whole bunch of drones that all think, sound, believe, act, and say the exact same things. But if we can accept that maybe, yes, we have certain things that are different, but doesn't mean we have to consider each other enemies. doesn't mean we have to let somebody feed us a narrative that we have to hate some other group. And yes, you might be thinking, well, this other group is being told to hate me. It's all part of the same problem. Two sides of the same coin. The point is, somebody is at the helm of every group that hates some other group, telling all of its followers and believers why this other group is the enemy and how they're to be treated. If we were unified without allowing someone to manipulate us into these groups, the divisions, the difficulties, the violence that results from it wouldn't be there. And we'd be capable of being a lot more aware of why the people that are actually feeding us these divisions don't have our best interest in mind. And that goes for the collective we, the people as a whole, and not just in any country, planet-wide. The more unified we are, the better our collective human experiences will be. That's what we want to aim for. We're going to be talking about a lot finding the common threads, recognizing the contributions of each person in each group, and not merely compromising. A single string of yarn can combine two pieces of fabric into a larger piece of fabric. At a distance, you might not be able to perceive that there's two pieces of fabric there. From a distance, they're going to appear as one. They contain both originals in their entirety and intact. The goal of the forge is the same. So then as we start to talk through what I'll try to bring to the table through the content of this channel, I'll be falling back on just my own traits and training. So part of that comes from being a creator, an inventor of sorts. And it forces you, when you have to build a problem or a solution up from scratch, you have to look at the overall problem you're trying to solve, and figure out will the solution work. Does it have errors inherent in the design? Trace those errors back to the source and learn ways to protect from those same things occurring again in the future. And the other side of that is just plain old critical thinking, challenging, questioning some of the things that oftentimes we're not allowed to, or at least not encouraged to question. These things that are considered taboo or blasphemous when you ask the question. Case in point, a couple of examples here. You look at the story we're told of the Garden of Eden, and Satan tempts Eve. She eats the fruit, and when God comes back and says, "Hey, what's going on here? What happened? What did you do?" and a curse is pronounced against Satan. Okay, that forever he or the serpent will crawl around on its belly for the rest of his existence here. And so you look at the story and the outcome, the aftermath, and things don't line up. We're told they do. We're not allowed to question it. We're told this is just the way it is. This was God's judgment. Therefore, you can't question it. You can't let a thought into your mind of this doesn't make sense. Because does God punish a lower level life form? Not enough intelligence to know one way or another. Is God going to really punish every serpent or snake to be doomed to crawl around on its belly, which for all we know is what serpents have always done anyway, for one, right? But is God going to curse this animal because of something that Satan did while imitating its form? And if it's meant for Satan, then why do we see later on in Job Satan walk up to God, or having been walking around, going to and fro, and visiting and challenging people? It just doesn't give a description that he's coming in crawling on his belly. So there's something more to the story that we're not being told. And you think about the Tower of Babel story. So do we really believe God got so threatened by the unity of mankind, which, by the way, now in the New Testament is supposed to be his goal in the whole thing, right? Is he really so threatened by the construction of this tower? Yet, you look at modern day, we've built skyscrapers. We've been to the moon. Much, much bigger endeavors, much, much farther reaching, huge, larger accomplishments than just a tower would have done. Not to mention the fact that if they had built the tower and gone up as high as they wanted to, they didn't know they would have run out of oxygen in the atmosphere and would have suffocated at the top anyway, depending on how tall they got it, right? So just some things like that. Critical thinking. Does this make sense? And we'll often find that the answer is no. I'm also going to come in from a background of spending well over a decade as a minister and assistant pastor, and a thought process there from the spiritual side of things and also where that journey has led me. It's certainly not where I started off from. It's certainly not where the group that I ministered with at the time would probably support a lot of the things that I would say and think right now. But again, it's about the freedom of thought, us being able to realize a path for ourselves and not simply having to be led there by somebody else all the time. And lastly, there's the background from my day job as an engineer, which focuses me a lot on looking at evidence, finding processes and adhering to processes in the way that you process data, the way that you go through it and try to make sense of everything that's in front of you. You're looking for a causality. You're looking at intended and unintended effects, the way of vetting a solution, the way of troubleshooting a problem. Those are things that, again, I deal with in my day-to-day life, and I'll be able to bring some of those tools to the table for this discussion as well. And this, again, gives you more insight into how I'm analyzing and processing the information that we're talking about in the content of this channel. Okay? We'll take all those things, filter them down, mix them up, and figure out, at least my part of it, from this background, how do we get to a harmonious path going forward? We want to find a unifying thread for humanity. Bring everyone to the table with their own contributions to the whole story. There's a version of events that allows for various schools of thought, traditionally thought of as opposing one another. There's a way for them to coexist without having to throw out all that they know or that they feel defines them, because we are a summary of our own opinions and thought processes. So people identify themselves by the things that they believe, they think, they accept, so on and so forth. Coming together doesn't mean we have to give up that identity. It just means we got to figure out, where do we fit into the larger puzzle. I know it sounds unrealistic now, very kumbaya, very let's all hold hands and make a circle around the world kind of thing, but it's not that. If you endure with us long enough, you'll find that out. We're talking about a very practical application of a thought process and a change in things that we can get to a better place than we are right now. A better place than we've even told is possible for us, and that's the whole point. We'll talk more about that as the channel goes on. We're going to seize as many opportunities as possible to identify alignment, and we'll call these points of alignment our moments of harmony. When do we happen to realize or come to an understanding of something that, hey, you know what? That thing I was told, I accepted somebody else's word on it without having experienced it myself. What I was told to think about this group of people, come to find out, it's not necessarily true. They're a lot like us, more like us than the people that told us to hate them or to not like them or to not associate with them. So we're going to try to find those moments of harmony. When can we find periods of things, our thought processes, our beliefs overlapping, that's going to help us collectively come to a better understanding by sitting down and talking with one another, laying out some of these thought processes, these beliefs, challenging them, and trying to figure out what's the truth about our history and about our situation and our reality. As the name Striker indicates, again, we want to do this in an honest and a transparent attempt to seek the truth. It's going to be uncomfortable. I can promise you that, especially if these are things that are new concepts to you that you haven't heard before, that you haven't considered, or that you haven't accepted. Some of the things we talk about are going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cost something. I can give the example again of time I've spent in various fields, or the time I spent like in the ministry. And while it definitely set a path for where I am right now, getting to this point actually did cost some of those things, right? It did cost me realizing that there were certain things that I followed or that I accepted that I don't now agree with. And I spent time, I invested into those things, right? So sometimes coming to a newer understanding or a better understanding is going to cost you giving up something that you've maybe spent time laboring with or developing in your past. But before it's all done, hopefully we're going to be able to show to you and display to you how unnecessary and how intentional some of these dogmatic divisions are to keep us separated. Within the masses, some see unity as a threat. They're worried about it leading to a one-world government and then to a satanic religion for those who have been taught that that's the outcome of all these things. Our unity is only a threat to those who profit from our division. That's the point. All the people that are feeding us narratives about you have an enemy, think of this group, this person in this way and they're against you, hate them, spend your energy against them, spend your money, come align with us, come throw your voice, your hat in the ring, get your voice behind ours, so on and so forth. They're benefiting from you accepting these divisions. It's because our unity is a threat. We're not controllable when we're unified as a people and not allowing somebody to always be pulling our strings. When we believe we can be unified, be together, and rule ourselves, there's not going to be any opportunity for that.
So then we also have to consider that many masters or spiritual leaders talk about unity by benevolence, by independence, and by self-government. Essentially what that means is be mature enough to know what's the right thing to do and do it because it's the right thing to do, whether it be because it helps you help someone else, not having to have these things dangled over our heads of a reward or a punishment, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And by that we can become self-governing and not need certain authority or authoritative figures, powers, laws, whatever, over us to drive that behavior. And if we can unify on that and get to that point together, it only helps strengthen the argument.
This is how we make Earth into a heavenly kingdom, an advanced and empathetic civilization. What these masters are talking about is how we have to reject some of the things we're being told about our nature and about our capabilities or the limitations of those capabilities in order for us to realize some of the promises that have been made to us. Those promises have been skewed. We've come to accept a version of those promises that's always out there in the future, some other realm, some other time, some other place. And that's really skewed us from understanding that the things that we were being pointed to, the things that were being promised, are actually things that are meant for us and that we are capable of achieving now. We'll get into that later on. Any religious component specifically that has at any time fostered, allowed, encouraged, justified, or led to control, hatred, violence, oppression of the poor or the weak is revealed to have man's corrupt hand already in play. Okay? The counter to that, my counter anyway, is that the Creator is all and only love. Only examples of pure love have given us true insight into the character of the Creator. These elements are present in every religion. They're messages from advanced beings a lot of times. Whether you look at them as angels or people look at them as other things, these messages have come to us and they're present in every religion. Everything that has some kind of dogmatic divisions that are there. It was a message that was being given to us a lot of times. But those messages have been polluted by mankind for opportunities to set aside a ruling class and to exploit control mechanisms and create xenophobic agendas. We need to keep the good and loving examples of all ancient writings and build ourselves up from there. We need a belief that each sect and group of humanity has a piece of the puzzle. And when we come and sit down and talk together, we'll get the whole puzzle put together. We'll never have the whole picture until we sit down and hear one another out. We have our own pieces. We think we have the whole picture. You'll be surprised once you actually start to sit down and hear some of the thoughts and the approaches from other people and some of the things that we've missed. We have to allow each to contribute their own part. I want to personally welcome you to the journey. Thank you for sticking through the video. Again, we'll be putting more up. We'll continue to have this conversation and continue to drive us down this path of where we need to be improving.
And then in closing, I just want to say until next time, please remember, seek truth, reclaim your knowledge, your existence, and your reality.